The Trap Set will always be available for free, but we rely on donations from our listeners. Please visit our website at thetrapset.net and click Donate. Subscribe to our show on iTunes, and if you enjoy what you hear, give us a review.
This is Joe Wong. Welcome to The Trap Set, where each week we explore the lives of drummers. I want to play something for you. You're hearing Wanted Criminals by The Evens, featuring my guest, Amy Farina, on drums. Formed in Washington, D.C. in 2001, The Evens comprises the duo of Farina and her partner, guitarist Ian Mackay. Amy has a background in fine art, which might explain her visually evocative, compositional drumming style. Her spacious groove and clever use of melodic counterpoint has evolved throughout her work with artists such as The Warmers and Lois. Amy continues to live in D.C. with her family. She and Ian are still working as The Evens, and they've also begun a new band with a third member.
Jails in search of prisoners. Jails in search of prisoners.
And now our conversation with Amy Farina.
Jails in search of prisoners. Jails in search of prisoners. Jails in search of prisoners. Jails in search of prisoners.
I was born in South Central Pennsylvania. I grew up in a small town called Sharmanstown. I lived there for 10 or so years, and then I moved to a neighboring town. But I spent my first 18 years in Pennsylvania, and I had I have an older brother who is he was into punk, and he had gotten this like suite of instruments. Like he had, it was somebody's garage was filled with like a PVPA and, like a Flying V copy and all these random instruments and stuff. And he, like my father, in a very kind of generous offering, collected those things for him and put them into my father's garage. My father and mother were divorced, and I at the time lived with my mom, and my brother lived with my dad. But we had this really nice kind of amicable familial thing where each parent had a child, and we'd switch, and it was just a good arrangement under the circumstances. And so one day I went over to my dad's house, and there was part of that suite of instruments was this old Ludwig, like mid-60s drum set, which was pretty like ubiquitous at the time in terms of like a, kind of drum set in the corner sort of thing.
When you were in high school, were you already playing shows?
No.
What kind of stuff were you into?
I was into punk in high school. I was going to shows, but I didn't start playing. I had somewhere in high school, I had like a little band with a couple friends, but we never played a show. And then another band, but we never played. I actually didn't really play my first show until I moved to Washington. I was 18, my first band there.
What brought you to Washington?
I went to school. I went to the Corcoran School of Art in D.C., which is at the time was a little art museum school.
What were you studying?
I was studying fine art.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Did you have ambitions? Did you have any sort of plan, or were you just going with whatever interested you at the time?
I think I did. I didn't have like a firm vision or plan, or I didn't have a firm plan. I think I did have a loose vision. Like I've always been, I think that growing up, I went to a large public high school, like a really big public high school. And most of the kids there would go to, state university, like Penn State or one of the big state schools in Pennsylvania or nearby, and generally return to Pennsylvania. And I didn't want to do that.
Why not?
It was time to get out of there. I think that our familial situation at home was, I think my parents really did their best, and in fact, I think they really facilitated my brother and I leaving. I think that it just was not.
They pushed the nest off of the ledge the second you left home.
Yeah. Well, I mean it more in I think our family was my mother's family was a large Catholic family. My father's family was a pretty large Catholic family. And there was a lot of things were just, the cycle was repeating over and over and over again. And there were lots of things within that cycle that shouldn't be repeated. And I think my parents...
Like drinking?
Drinking and...
my mom's from a large Catholic family, so that was the first thing that popped into my head.
That definitely was very, yes. And just other, relationship issues and various forms of abuse and that sort of thing. So I think that my parents recognized this isn't working and certainly will not work for our children. I think they saw that we were, we wanted something different, but it was hard for them. It was really hard for them to kind of, when you're in a family or a cycle like that, it's hard to remove yourself or certainly be supported in leaving. But my parents somehow managed to do that, and I think my brother and I, and it was life-saving, I think, for my brother and I. And I really am indebted to them for many things, but that in particular. And it's nothing against. I don't mean that people who stay in small towns follow the paths of their parents, or it's not it's just it wasn't what was right for me and my brother, I think.
This train is an exit only. It's an opening, which explains why this shit washes away, then runs right back in.
After you finished school, what was your plan?
I had, in that time, in those years in school, I had started to play in bands and tour, and I had some nice opportunities where I was able to do some things. I played with a woman named Lois for a while, and she was really busy. She had a lot, we went to Europe and we, toured on the West Coast, and this was while I was in school, so I managed to do school and be a touring musician for a little while, which was hard. But so by the end of school, that's what I was that's where my time, I mean, I was juggling a couple different things. I was playing in bands and I was working as a artist / craft person. I had a few jobs that I did. And that's pretty much what I did for a long time. I did those things.
Were you able to apply anything from your art background or from your academic background to your approach to music?
I mean, I don't know. I would like to say yes. I feel like I have. I mean, it's funny because art and music have always been really different to me. Like art theory, for example, made a lot of sense to me. And music theory makes sense too, but music as in general has always been much more abstract to me in my mind. It's a lot harder to quantify for me than art. And I can't find words to.
Is that by choice?
I think it's just the way my brain works. I think partially I grew up making my grandfather was an architect and my mother was an artist. And there was this, I was sort of, I think, kind of shepherded in the art direction by my family and perhaps made to believe you're very good at this and you can do this and this is your language and that sort of thing. And in the music thing was more that's her hobby, that's her sort of this and so I think that I developed maybe a language for art that I didn't develop for music at a young age, maybe. I don't know. They could just be, it could be, the synapses in my brain, how they.
Well, did you ever consider going to music school like your brother did?
Not until I was 35.
Oh.
Then I was I really want to go to music school.
And did you?
I didn't, but I did start studying with at GW University, the drum department there. I started working there, and
did it feel constructive?
Yeah, it was great. I mean, I still do it when I can. There's a teacher I have there that I still meet up with whenever I can. It was weird. It was, yeah, I love it.
Let's talk about how the Warmers got together.
Sure. Juan Carrera, who is the bass player of the Warmers, and I were very good friends.
And now a big-time manager.
It's true. He is. He's a busy, busy man. He and I we played with Lois Maffeo together. We had done some touring with her, and Lois had moved. She was living in Washington and moved back to the West Coast, at which point Juan and I were really eager to keep playing, and we were kind of brainstorming, how do we do this? What do we want to do? And we were big fans of Alec Mackay, and personally and musically, he was and is just a really special guy. And we asked him to play, and he said yes. And so we were bass and drums, and Alec wasn't an instrumentalist at the time, but he decided to pick up guitar to be in the band. So we were a three-piece.
Did it feel like you had an instant connection when you started playing together?
I think so, yeah. For me, it was a really really band to be in musically and personally. Juan and Alec both are really easy people for me to be with and get along with. And we had, I think we all had a lot going on in our lives, and at a certain point, I think we were probably working towards different things, and it got a little confusing.
What were you working towards?
I think I was working towards, I really wanted to work. I get a little bit obsessive
about working on the band.
Yeah. And I think that Juan was doing a lot of, like, he always managed bands. He always booked tours for people. He was just like, he was the go-to guy to get anything done for bands in and out of Washington. Like, he was and he was busy with that. And Alec was going to school and writing, and, he had a lot. He was starting his own family, and he had a lot going on. And so I think we all got to a point where we knew for each other we weren't, like, as a band, it wasn't sustainable.
What was your next step?
Then I kind of went inward for many years, and I worked a lot. I continued doing artwork. I worked as a scenic artist for a long time, and I played a lot. Like, that's when I actually, post-Warmers, I think, is when I really started to kind of have I always loved to play by myself. I often hear musicians and drummers in particular who say, like, I don't like to practice, or I don't like to play by myself, which I totally get. Like, no form replicates, like, playing with someone else. But I always liked to play by myself. It was always like a meditative thing for me, and continues to be. Like, if I don't practice in some form almost every day, I get, like, I feel out of balance. And so I started to play a lot just by myself. And I mean, I did a lot of, like, I played with other people quite a bit too, like little projects and recording projects. And actually, I remember I house sat for Brendan one summer, and he had this, like, great little studio in his basement, and he taught me how to use everything. And I made, like, a little tape of, wrote some songs, and I would play piano and sing and play drums. And I did a lot of that kind of thing. And I worked and worked. And I did, I played, like, Ted Leo was a good friend of mine, and I played with him a bit, and other friends, and for years, just, kind of exploring and doing things and trying to,
Well, you say you went inward for years. What does that mean?
What it means is what it really means is that I was really, like, I think I was in a very introspective and depressive state for a while. And, or maybe those two words shouldn't be shared in the same. I don't think. I mean, probably just depressive.
Self-aware.
Yeah, or I don't know if that. I think when you're depressed, it's hard to be really self-aware. Like, but I also, it served a really important, I was sort of growing up, I think, in a way, or growing. A lot of things were going on in my life, relationship-wise, and, like, for example, the Pirate House, where I'd lived for quite a while at that age, like, living anywhere for 7 or 8 years, which I think I had was a long time. And it was a really, like, really incredible home to have and to share with people who were the most important people in my life, like dear friends. And people started to, move, and the house went up for sale. And it was like, I think I had come to Washington to find, like, to make a home of sorts.
Right.
And now my home was, like,
it's like the tribe is dispersing to a certain extent.
Exactly. And that was that era. Like, Washington had been
Things were getting expensive.
They were getting expensive, and there was sort of this mass exodus at that time. People were going to different parts of the country, and most of my closest friends left, and I didn't. Like, I just decided I'm going to work. I'm going to, like, I was just going to work was what I was going to do, and see what came of that. And
were you working because you were kind of trying to insulate yourself from certain feelings?
Probably, yeah. Yes.
Do you still do that?
Yes.
All right. So I think I do too. Do you ever think about what's the genesis of that? I mean, does it come from your parents? Does it come from the, like, residue of Catholicism?
Yeah.
Or, like,
both those things. It's also really, I mean, it may seem like, sort of avoidant, but it's actually really practical. I mean, it
Sure.
serves a really
Sure.
in that time, I bought a house or an apartment, and
Wow.
I made my own home. Like I really, and I mean, I did it in a concrete way, but also in a more sort of spiritual way, in a way. I mean, there is something to be said for doing the work, for just doing
Sure.
it. And I think that it's like, toiling is good for certain. I mean, you have to, at a certain point, you have to
Face yourself.
exactly. But it's better for me, actually doing something in that time where you don't know what you're doing.
Do you ever get super depressed and not feel like doing anything?
Very rarely.
So you
It's rare.
jump in with work.
Yeah. I mean,
Okay.
I occasionally, that's the kind of usually if I get, I'm getting sick or something,
Yeah.
it's very rare for that to happen. But I don't think, I haven't had, I know people who have suffered from very, very debilitating depression. And that's something that, is a whole other, it's a disease, it's
Yeah.
a very serious, and I think that what I was wrestling with it was a little bit different.
Was it more circumstantial?
I think that it was, I think that I'm wired for that kind of, I tend towards anxiety and just general depression and that sort of thing. But yes, it was definitely exacerbated by circumstance.
What changed to make you kind of go outward?
I really think, Ian and I started playing music together, and that really had a significant.
Yeah, let's talk about how the Evens got started. What was your relationship before you started playing music together?
We were, I was in a band with Alec, Ian's brother, and so I was friends with the Mackay family for years. When I moved to Washington, I got to know them pretty quickly, and Ian produced Warmer's stuff. He actually did some production for some Lois recordings. We had worked together and certainly saw each other everywhere. We traveled in the same, social group of friends, that sort of thing, and saw each other at shows all the time. And he was a real, he was always, I think he appreciated my musicality. And so we had a good musical. We'd, watch bands together and talk about music quite a bit. And at some point, Fugazi, I think, was taking a little break. It probably was actually around, I can't remember which one of Brennan's children, but I think they took a little time off so Brennan could be with his...
It's hard to keep them all straight.
There's 4, and one of them is about to graduate from high school, which is really exciting. So Ian said, you should bring I was living in an apartment at the time, and I had my drums in my apartment, and I had every towel and blanket and pillow around. And he's like, you should bring your drums out to Discord and you can just play them there and come out and play. And maybe we could play together sometime. And I was like, that's great. So I did, and we did. And the first time we played together, we wrote a song, and it was, I think both of us were like, how'd that happen? What just happened? It was very it was a total surprise to both of us, our sort of musical. I mean, we had it in conversation, but we had never really played together before. And then we did, and it was the easiest thing that either of us had ever done. So it just happened.
When did you kind of become romantically involved?
That followed, and I can't say exactly when, but not too long after. It was, I think it was sort of again, took us both by surprise. It was sort of the music had been happening, and I think it just was the conduit for...
Yeah, how does that even happen? You're in a band with somebody, you're friends for a long time. Do you just start making out one day or what?
No.
Or
I
are
mean,
you
I
like,
think
"Are
it
we gonna
begins
date?"
with a lot of conversation. We were like any close relationship. I mean, most people who are in bands have this occur. I mean, maybe not the romantic part, or maybe they do the romantic.
Sometimes, yeah.
When you open yourself to the music, I think it opens lots and lots. And I think both of us were at points in our personal lives where it was the right thing. Like it just was, and we were really like it just fostered, the music fostered our friendship, which fostered our, romantic connection, I guess.
Did you make any conscious choices to change your approach as an artist with the Evens versus other projects you were in?
Kinda. We had this like dilemma where we had to be a two-piece, and we had to figure out how to make that work.
Why did you have to be a two-piece?
Well, because we couldn't find a bass player. Like, it just wasn't
Did you try people out and it just didn't feel the same?
Kinda. We played with a couple people. And we have and interestingly now we're playing with a friend, and it's really going well. We always, I think, wanted to be like a band, but it didn't, I think that yes, the right person wasn't available. And I don't mean it wasn't like no one was like right for us. It was more that like, are we right for anyone else? Like, I think asking a bass player to join a band that is like ultimately like a couple and then a family. Like we have a kid together now, and it's a tricky, it's hard. It's hard to be like a family and a band because no one can like.
Well, I think it would raise the stakes for the two of you, especially. Like now you're relying on each other not only for musical partnership but for life partnership.
Right. Definitely. And it's a lot to ask of someone to like.
And then you got some guy coming in playing bass.
Yeah, it was, and we seriously, like for years, we like always thought like that would be, with this person might work or this person, and it just didn't make sense as much as what we were doing made sense, I guess. And
did you feel like a need to top yourself internally?
I mean, I think it would have been like impossible to do. I mean,
it seems like what you guys did is really smart. Like you're like, we're totally different. We're in a different space. We're recontextualizing it. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it wasn't that. I mean, it's certainly like part of. We came from those things, and it was significant and continues to be. But we were. I guess it's like there's people spend a lot of time documenting and archiving and like discussing what was, and what was is important. It's informs what is to come, perhaps, but I think there's the now. There's what's happening now, and that's what was happening now. And I think I was just thinking about what was happening now and how to make that the best it could be.
That's great. I have trouble getting in the now sometimes.
It's just right here in front of you. Just
yeah, all right, fine.
Have it.
Taunt me, why don't you? All right, you said Carmine is 7?
Yeah, he'll be 8 very soon.
Was there a lot of discussion as far as should we have a kid, should we not have a kid? Was it something that you always wanted to do?
I did not. I think I always wanted a family, but I had no idea of what that would mean. Like, I think at a certain point, Juan and I were living at the Pirate House, and Juan was like, I thought, like, I'll be a foster parent, and Juan will be, like, the father figure. I never actually discussed this with Juan.
But that was just what was in your head
at
the
like,
time.
I thought, like, something... I just didn't know how, And then I think when Ian and I got together, it became clear. Like, I was like, oh, I see how this works. Like, in my life prior to that, there wasn't really a scenario where like it made sense, and then all of a sudden it made sense. So and there was discussion, but not a lot of discussion. I think it was pretty clear to both of us, like, this is what, at least we'd like to make an attempt to see what happens or whatever.
And how did it change your relationship to art and music, if at all?
I don't know that it did. It definitely affected like the practical side of things. Like you can't, I know a lot of people with kids in bands who can go to band practice and the other parent takes care of the kid.
Right.
But when you're in a band with the other parent, it makes it hard. So we've definitely like, we have not toured. We still play almost daily, but to much less. Like we have a much smaller window of time and we tour less and that sort of thing. But our kid really like, he's a really great, he loves to go on tour and he's good at like, he gets the drill.
What are your goals moving forward?
I mean, I still have a lot of the same desires I've always had, like being a good human being and wanting to make the world a better place. And, so I still work towards those every day, trying to do well in the world. And I think the more time you spend on Earth, the more like, it's always been crazy, but you become more in tune to the depth of the craziness in the world and more committed to making it less, painful for people. So, and how one does that, I don't know, but I try to do that, daily with just, I work when I'm not playing music. I work as a teacher. I teach art and music to kids, and that's become a really nice thing for me to do, and hopefully for the kids.
Privately or in groups?
I teach at a couple little like private schools and DC public schools. I have a couple of different classes I teach. So it's a range of kids, a lot of different kinds of kids. And Ian and I are working on music. We've been playing with a friend, and we have, hopes that maybe by the end of the year we'll do some. We haven't actually played an even show since it's been a couple years since we've done any touring, but we're hoping by the end of the year we're going to do something.
Do you have any kind of spiritual practices?
I mean, not like by subscription. Like I don't sort of practice, anything. But I do think I try to be like generally aware, and which is probably a form of spirituality,
Well, Amy, Farina, thank you so much for doing this.
Thanks a lot. It was a pleasure.
The Trap Set is produced by me, Joe Wong, along with Chris Karwowski, who also edits the program. Follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at The Trap Set, and visit our website, thetrapset.net, to subscribe to our show for free. If you enjoyed what you heard today, please donate to our show. If you can't afford to donate, please tell a friend and give us a good rating on iTunes. Send your feedback and guest requests to thetrapset@gmail.com.